Hey guys, thank you for tuning into the Justin Wenzel Podcast. On this show, we like to share people's stories, the things that have made them who they are today. And today we have a really special guest. Thanks again for tuning in. If you guys like this, make sure you click subscribe. Make sure that you show us some love in the comments and that little like button. Smash that shit. Terry, what's up, bro?
What's up, man? How you doing?
This is cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I've never met you before. This is our first time. We just went to lunch, got to know each other. It was rather natural.
Yeah, I feel like we could be brothers in another life for sure.
That's great. Let's just do it in this one.
All right.
So it's funny. Jeremy obviously introduced Jeremy Jackson, for you guys who don't know, introduced us, and it's been really cool learning about you and just spending the last hour at lunch, kind of getting to know you. And there's several things that I want to touch on today, but I want to kind of go into your MMA career. I want to know a little bit more about that. You know, I love MMA. We talked a little bit of professional wrestling too, but tell me, like, what did that look like, and how did you get into martial arts?
Yeah, man. As a kid, I wanted to do martial arts my whole life, but I was like the smallest kid in school. Parents, I didn't play sports. So as soon as I graduated high school, I went to like a Taekwondo studio, started competing in that. And then I got introduced to these Toughman Contests. I don't know if you remember those, but like it was outdoor Toughman, and they would have, it was 1 minute rounds, 3 1 minute rounds with like the pull on gloves, and basically just guys off the street would, come and do these events. And I got addicted really to boxing. I fell in love with boxing. I found like a local coach and started doing these Toughman Contests. And started winning, and I think I won 6 or 7 events, and they're like, okay, you can't fight anymore. You're not, you're considered more of an amateur. So I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee at like 24 and started training with Ace Miller. So I started my career as a professional boxer, really, my pro career. Boxed with him. It was definitely a different transition from Toughman to like pro boxing. I moved originally thinking I was going to be able to fight amateur, but because I'd been paid money during Toughman, I was considered a pro, even though it wasn't even
Golden Gloves pro or
no, like pro. My first pro fight was Harris Casino. I think Sugar Shane Mosley was on that card.
Oh, wow.
And I got knocked out. I got knocked out in the first round. And from fighting in Toughman, like my whole game was like, I hit you, you hit me, and I'm going to, knock you out. And I didn't think I could be knocked out. And I remember, and this guy was I was a small heavyweight. I was like 205 pounds. This guy's like 240, 250. And not a good record, but he ended up catching me with a left hook, like straight arm hook. And I just remember waking up and the ref standing over me, and he goes, 9. And I was like, oh, they must count backwards in the pros. But they don't. So I went back home, tail between my legs, and then I just did defense for a year. Just trained, and that's really what my coach was known for. And then, I had a couple of kids. My sons were young, and trying to take care of them and work and train. It was never full time. It was full time until I got knocked out, and then, I was having to do other things. So that's how it started. And then I had an opportunity to fight for the World Combat League, kickboxing.
Did you return after your defensive training? Because defensive
boxing
is what wins matches.
I ended up winning. Granted, I would only have like a fight a year because I was, working, and it was kind of a part-time thing. But I ended up winning my next 7 fights. And then I got knocked out again because I came back after not training for a while. The guy was literally like 4-24, and he caught me with a crazy shot and knocked me out. So I've joked a couple times about, I've knocked out world champions and been knocked out by guys 4 and 24. So, a fight is a fight is a fight, right?
Sure.
And
how did switching to more of a defensive mentality carry into the rest of your career? Because again, like I said, like defensive fighters typically are the ones who have the best records, right?
Yeah.
Look at your Floyd Mayweathers. I mean, purely defensive fighter.
Yeah.
How does that change your mindset when you go in first? Because tough guy is going to be straight up offense. And,
it's either home runs or strikeouts, right?
Yeah.
So the defensive thing, like my offense got a whole lot better because my defense was good. I wasn't worried, I knew that I would be able to defend a punch and slip, and, I learned distance and I learned timing, and it helps everything. You're having a good defense helps your offense like tremendously. Mm-hmm. And you hear guys say a good offense is a good defense, but when you know that you can, shed a punch, you can parry a punch, you can slip, you can, and you have distance and timing, it's so much easier to hit people and hit them with power. So that it transitioned, really well. When I switched to the world, I had the opportunity to fight for the World Combat League, was the Chuck Norris League, where they kind of fought in the pit. And I was scared to death because my last fight I'd gotten knocked out. It had been like a year and a half. I got this opportunity. It was on Versus. I don't even know if that's a channel anymore.
I don't think so, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it was on the Versus channel. Smoke, lights, the whole thing, televised. And I come out, and the first guy that I fight is a guy named Rath White.
Okay.
And Rath's like 6'5", 6'6", 250 pound, and at one time was the USA Muay Thai champion. And I'm like, fuck, this is my guy. That's my first draw. And I remember coming out and I come out first, and he comes out, and of course he's the favorite. And I don't know, he looked at me, and it's all showmanship. Like, he's a great guy, but he pointed at me and like slashed his throat, and I just...
that made matters even worse.
Yeah,
right?
I was like, fuck, but it pissed, and I remember coming out in that fight and just walked straight across the ring and threw the first punch and hit him on the money with the jab, and he went down. And when he stood back up, I had to knock him down 2 more times, but like, he wasn't there. So probably that was my favorite fight. They all don't go like that, right?
Well, yeah.
I like knocking out better than getting knocked out for sure, but
it's a little more fun.
That fight ended up making it on YouTube, like even before that show was released.
Oh, wow.
And that fight, even though it was a blimp in my career, a lot of things came from that, if that makes sense. Like,
okay.
People would see that, and because I had gems, and I got a little bit of notoriety from it, if that makes sense.
Of course.
And then, I tried my hand at MMA, but I didn't have a wrestling background, which, I had a MMA fight in Atlantic City, and fought a guy, and just remember getting, sweeping the guy. It was the first time I cut weight. I didn't really understand about cutting weight because I'd always fought heavyweight. And I fought this guy from Detroit, actually. A guy named Del Crow, and that was in Detroit. That was the Toughman. Can't remember the guy's name I fought, but he was a boxer wrestler, and he ended up taking me down, and I did a scissor sweep and ended up on top of him. And I just remember trying to hit him and felt like that bad dream where you're punching through peanut butter. Yeah, like it was the worst. And because I had cut to 185 from like 226 in like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
With the sauna and
so
all
you're
this.
fatigued, dehydrated.
Like, the weirdest feeling, because I felt light, I felt good, but there was the weirdest, like, just I couldn't do anything. And he ended up getting on top. He climbed up a fence and mounted me and just elbowed me over and over and over again. So that was my one MMA fight. But I switched over to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and fell in love with it. I competed IBJJF tournaments for the last 10 years probably.
I hear a lot about guys that start doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and exactly what you said. They fall in love with it. And I've considered it a couple times. I've been invited multiple times to go out and do it. And I just don't like being on the ground. Being my size, I always feel like, but what is it that really makes these guys go crazy over BJJ?
I mean, for me, I was always a stand-up fighter, right? I was a kickboxer, boxer. I have long arms, all the defensive stuff and the timing. In my mind, I always thought, when they try to take me down, I'm going to knock them out. Or I teach Krav Maga, and they're going to get me on the ground. I'm going to poke them in the eyes or bite them, or
Right.
But the truth is, actually, and I learned the lesson when I was doing the Human Weapon show. I went out to Randy Couture's, and I am sparring with this guy, and right off the bat, I'm ripping him with a jab, and he's like, "You box?" I'm like, "Yeah." Next jab I threw, he went under and took me up in the air and put me on my back. He was an Ohio State wrestler. And he did it over and over. And it was to the point where I knew what he was going to do and I couldn't do anything about it. And then some of the other guys that I trained would get me on the ground and just, they would tie me in knots. And all the things that I thought I would do was bullshit.
When you're tall and you're going up against these wrestlers who are stocky and they get low and they're
going to get you down.
Yeah, it's almost like that moment when you're a little kid has a frisbee, right?
Yeah.
And he's nut level and and he winds up and you're like, whoa, back up. That's how I feel when wrestlers come at me. I'm like, dude, I don't know how to get low that. I don't know what I'm doing. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, and you're a big guy. You learn how to sprawl. That would be it would be really hard for somebody to get you down. But guys on that level, Ohio State, Iowa, those guys, they're going to
tossing you around.
It's what they do. But the thing that I think I love or fell in love with, especially as I've gotten older, is the fact that, I teach Krav Maga, and Krav Maga I think is, for true self-defense, is probably the best, just because, my wife's 115, 20 pounds. If she punches me or you or any of these guys in the face, it's probably not going to have a bunch of an effect, right? But if she drives her fingers into your eyes and shin kicks you in the groin, it's going to have an effect.
Yeah.
I've hit probably 1,000 guys in the face as a professional fighter, and I've hit plenty of them as hard as I can, and they just look at you. Yep. I've never accidentally poked someone in the eyes where they didn't freak out, or even shin kicking somebody in the groin. They get a cup on, whoa, So the Krav Maga, I think for men, jiu-jitsu's the best thing to train just because it gives you the fight feeling. But for women, I think Krav Maga is the best because it teaches them to fight dirty.
Yep.
And but the one thing I love about jiu-jitsu is it gives me another option. Because you're my friend, maybe you relapse, you have a bad night, you're on some pills, you're drunk, and you start getting aggressive. I don't want to Krav Maga you. I don't want to poke you in the eyes and kick you in the groin and, and hurt you, but I could take you down, put you in a chokehold, put you to sleep, walk away, control you, whatever it is, and it gives me another option.
Yeah.
It gives me another way to defend myself, or protect myself, or protect my loved ones without having to actually annihilate someone. Maybe I'm getting soft in my old age, but
no,
that's one of the things that I really love about jiu-jitsu. Now, I will say it seems to me that the new age jiu-jitsu with the no-gi and the Gordon Ryans, and I love those guys. It's fun to watch, but it's turned into more of the sport, just breaking people's ankles and ripping their knees out. And so for me personally, it's kind of taken away from that softer side of jiu-jitsu,
So, but there is two sides of you, right? There is the fight side of you, and then there's this spiritual breath work. You do the retreats and things like that. Yeah. Where do those two come together?
Actually, on my men's retreat, because the name of the retreat is The Balanced Man. I really think that, you can be too, what's a good word? Squishy, like too soft, too spiritual, too, woo-woo. And then you can be too the other way, like too aggro, too everything's kill, kill, kill. I think there's a balance there, right? Where a man can be strong and have the capability of inflicting pain, of protection, of safety, of security, and have empathy, have compassion, those sort of things. So on the retreat, these guys are coming in. Most of them have never fought, don't have any kind of MMA background. And then the first day, we're exposing them to boxing. We have the dinner on Saturday, and then Sunday morning we're boxing. So some of these guys have never been punched in the face. They've never tried to punch someone in the face. And it's not really the goal to make these guys fighters. We just want them to learn a little bit of basic boxing for self-defense. And that's where you and I are going to connect on a level that we're not going to connect just having a conversation.
Right.
There's a trust that's built. There's a respect that's built. And it's easy for me to hide in a circle of just talking and sharing our feelings. It's very hard to hide when you've got the gloves on and you're trying to punch some guy in the face and he's trying to punch you in the face. So if there's anger, if there's fear, if there's anticipation, if you find out pretty quickly that you're a level above me, and then how are you going to use that? Are you going to help me and teach me as a brother, or are you going to beat the shit out of me for your own ego? Right. So that's where these lessons are learned. And then the second day is jiu-jitsu. Same thing. Like, you're a big, strong guy, but you never been on the ground before and wrestled with a guy that like knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
It can be humbling.
Sounds like my nightmare.
Yeah. And again, we're not trying to make these guys fighters or get them to fall in love with jiu-jitsu. We're going to teach them a couple of things that you would have the awareness to know, and it would be helpful if you ever ended up in that situation. But it's more about what's going on in those moments.
Sure.
Right? We're building that container, we're building that trust. And then the next day is like a pretty massive hike to my buddy Aaron's land. He's got like 140 acres down to a year-round waterfall. It's beautiful.
Nice.
But it's like an hour down and an hour and a half straight up and out. So it's a people's personalities show up,
For sure. I like a couple things backing up a little bit to the balance, man. And it's funny because like I've been known in so much of my content and so much of the podcasts that we talk about when we're talking in terms of business, balance really doesn't exist when you're an entrepreneur and starting a business in terms of where your time goes and things like that. Mm-hmm. Sorry, but balance is when it comes to this, building something, it's a fast track to mediocrity.
Right.
But what we're talking about is being able to balance your masculinity with your vulnerability and your spirituality and things like that. And that is very, very important.
Yeah.
Most guys that I surround myself with are pretty tough dudes. A lot of us have been through a lot.
Right.
And a lot of us look dangerous to a certain extent and probably are dangerous to a certain extent. But all of those men are also extremely kind. Mm-hmm. Very, very kind. They have pain in their eyes. They know they've been through some shit. They've been through some life. And I think it is very important for you to be able to both be compassionate, understanding, and empathetic, but you should be able to fuck someone up if need be.
Yep.
I heard this thing about a molester getting interviewed. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, where he's like, he would look at the dad.
Yep. He would pick his targets based on the father.
Yeah. And
I think a lot of men need to go on these retreats and need to spend some time with other men, because that's really ultimately what's going to grow them nowadays. When you're in your 30s and in your 40s, most men don't have other men. Most men get so absorbed in their job
Yep.
and in their families, and they don't realize how important it is to have that brotherhood. It's missing from 90%, if not more, of households that men are in charge of, right? Now, also you have guys that are staying home, that are stay-at-home dads and stuff like that. They probably need it even more. But how do you guys put your focus into sending that guy home with a new level of skill and a new understanding? In other words, what keeps a guy from feeling great in the moment while he's on the trip and on the retreat, but then he just goes back and slips into his own ways?
That's what happens to 90%, right?
Sure.
So for us, we don't want it to be a glorified vacation, right? We want it to be something where these guys, because it's easy. I live in Costa Rica. It's a lot easier for me to be zen and peaceful and meditate. And, I'm looking at the ocean every day and I'm in the jungle.
Right.
Literally, I live in the middle of the jungle. Like I'm surrounded by monkeys and birds. And so it's a lot easier than being an entrepreneur.
Right.
But
if you have like Tyler from Scranton, Pennsylvania, who works at a fucking accountant's office, and he gets to experience that for 4 days, what can you send him packing with?
Yeah, so first of all, we do Saturday to Saturday. It's a week. And the biggest thing I think we teach guys, including entrepreneurs, to own their morning. To get up. I don't give a shit if you got to get up at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning and you create a space that's your space. And I'm talking 20, 30 minutes. So I started doing this almost a year ago. It was introduced to me on the retreat. I get up every day before I look at my phone, before I check emails. I will say I usually make a cup of coffee first, but I get on the mat and stretch. Like I do the same routine every day, same stretch routine. Because I used to bullshit and say I was going to go to yoga because there's yoga everywhere, but I hate yoga, right? I don't want to say I hate it now, but like I hate going to class and feeling like everybody's more flexible than me. My knees don't bend right. I'm all broken from fighting. So
it's humbling. Yoga's humbling.
Yeah. So I want flexibility, but I'm not doing the things I need to do to be flexible. But when I get up in the morning every single day and I do this 10 to 15 minute stretch routine, I've gotten a lot more flexible. I feel a lot better. After my stretch routine, I do either like a G breath, which is one of, Jeremy and Energy's breathwork things that's short. And then it sets me up for that meditation I'm going to drop into. And I have a hard time meditating. I have a little bit of a squirrel brain. I was also an entrepreneur, right? Like, so I'm always thinking about what's next. But I took that time to sit still after that G breath, and I do my gratitude. I say everything that I'm thankful for. Right, I go through a whole list of all, and it's a big list. Thankful for a lot of shit. I'm thankful for my wife and my kids and where I live and my friends and my teachers and my guides and my health, like all these things. And then I sit there and I say my daily mantra. My daily mantra is my family and I are blessed and protected. We expand in love, abundance, success, and health every day, and we inspire others around us to do the same. And I might say it 3 times. I might say it 5 times, 10 times. That's my meditation. That's my whole morning practice. The whole thing takes 20 to 30 minutes, and then I rock and roll the rest of the day. If even yourself, as busy as you are, as go as you are, all the shit that you're responsible for and the things that you would be better at doing it, right? If you have that morning practice, and you're going to last a hell of a lot longer. Because so many people, in that 25 to 35, 40-year range are building, and they're like, no, I got to build. Great. Absolutely. But what good is it going to be to build all that shit and all that wealth and all that stuff, and then you're 45, you're 50, and you're burnt. You're burnt out. Yeah, you've been working out, but like your brain and your nervous system are shot.
Yeah, the morning routine is powerful. I have a pretty extensive morning routine myself, very similar to yours.
Yeah.
I'm usually up at 3. 3:30.
Yeah.
I don't set an alarm. My body just pretty much naturally gets me up right around there. And I do my reading in the morning, a little bit of meditation, but then I go into my cardio. I do sauna, cold plunge, all that stuff. I think that for most men between, let's just say 35 and 50, right? Or 35 and 60, right? We're so caught up in that grind. And if they are building something, which is the minority.
Yeah.
But if they are actually building something, they do get caught up in like income earning activities and growth and expansion and things like that. But the one thing that they're neglecting is their own mindset. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're building something and you're talking about expanding and growing clientele and personnel and all of that, you're going to be hard pressed to be a leader if you're not taken care of first. In other words, when the plane goes down, you put the mask on yourself first, right? And I think a lot of guys that put themselves second to whatever they're doing remain second to whatever they're doing. And they're never put in a place where they can be really in charge. Because until you're really in charge of yourself, you're not in charge of shit.
Yeah, and that's the thing we're doing. That's something they can take. That's a skill they can take back home, right? They may go home and never box again, or not join a jiu-jitsu gym, right?
Well, maybe they will.
Maybe they will. Maybe now they realize.
Sure, guys do. They come back and they're like,
oh yeah, especially the jiu-jitsu because it's easier to find, right? And a lot of guys don't want to go into work black eyes and busted noses, but the jiu-jitsu, they can roll, they can get that fight feeling. They tap when when they can't take anymore, and they keep going. So we do have a lot of guys. And then the other thing, one of the other biggest things I think that makes the Balanced Man different is when you go back, we have a bi-weekly call every week or every other week where you drop right back into that retreat space. Because on the retreat, and this is used a lot in AA and some other things, you do a 3-word check-in. Right? So it's just whatever your 3 words are for the day, the week, whatever. You say your 3 words, really feeling them in the moment, and then we respond, I see you, I hear you. So having that circle and that trust and that brotherhood, then when we come back, you're back home, you're back in your normal, natural environment of life, but then you can get on that call and we drop right back in with, a little bit of breath work, dropping back in with a 3-word check-in. Hey, what's going on, Justin? Right? Like, how are you bringing back the stuff that you learned on the Balanced Man? How's it integrating into your natural life? And we're having, now probably the biggest percentage of our base is coming from the women sending their husbands, sending their brothers, sending their sons on the retreats.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because a lot of guys, that's the excuse, right? Oh, man, my wife's not going to let me come to Costa Rica and, without her.
Yeah, a bunch of dudes.
I can't leave. I got, she's going to be mad because she's going to have to take care of the kids, or I got work to do, or it's the money, whatever it is, right?
But I think healthy households and healthy relationships, your significant other, wife, girlfriend, whatever, should probably encourage it.
Absolutely.
I know that that's the case with my wife. Like when it's like, dude's trip or whatever, I talked to Jeremy about going to Turkey to get my hair done. Right. I wanted to get some pluggies.
Yeah.
I can't do it though. I'll tell you a funny story.
Okay.
Not even a funny story. Yeah. This is so a lot of my friends are bald.
Yeah. I gave up.
Yeah. So we got to learn to let go.
Yeah.
Right.
Let it go.
And so when I talked to Jeremy, he's like, yeah, man, we're going to do it. We're going to Turkey. I can get you a session and all this stuff, right? When I talk to my other bald friends, they look at me like this. Well, why?
Yeah.
You're leaving me? And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to leave you. But anyways, one thing that I wanted to mention too about like taking some of the stuff home with you. One thing that we do at our events is we don't do retreats, but we do events. I guess they would be retreats to the people that come to them because they're 2 days here. Yeah. But we do improv.
Oh, perfect.
And we host like improv games and things like that at our workshops. Yeah. And then we encourage when they go back to go take an improv course, because it's totally different when you're with a bunch of people, you know. It still is. It still is a little, you know,
it is
nerve-wracking. But the people who actually do it and actually do take it home, right? And this would be the same with boxing. This would be the same with any skill set that you would learn at the Balanced Man, is just the fact that you taking the initiative, right? Because we see this all the time. There's masterminds that people go to and they're like, I'm starting the business, I'm building my personal brand, I'm gonna write a book. And they're all excited because they saw Daniel G or Grant Cardone or some fucking guy that's like in his 50s telling people that they can do it too. And then they get home and it's like, I gotta take my kids to soccer practice. And like, then all of a sudden life sets back in and they don't do shit. But if they took one thing back with them and just took the initiative to pursue that one thing and on top of the morning routine and everything, their life would be completely different.
Yeah. And when you have the brotherhood, like we have the WhatsApp chat, right? We're checking in every day. Hey, how am I feeling today? These are my 3 words: feeling blessed, feeling inspired, feeling motivated. Or maybe I'm feeling like shit. Like whatever it is, it's not always rainbows and butterflies, you know, but it's real conversations with guys that you know have been through the same thing that you've been through. And then, hey, I got up, I stretched, I journaled, I meditated. Boom. And it's not a contest, right? But it's an accountability piece because, man, Justin, he already did all this stuff today and I haven't done anything yet. Like, it makes me get on the floor. I'm at least going to do my stretch.
Right.
So it's just having brothers that you know are doing the work, doing the same thing, that are holding you accountable. It's not a contest, but it's like, man, they got up and did it. Like, I got to take these excuses out of my life and get up and do it.
There comes a point where there would be nothing to contest in doing the routine stuff that you're supposed to do. Right? Where it becomes a thing where it's like, you know, it's rewarding at first and then it becomes something that you do to the point where your brain is rewired to where it's like, well, I do my morning routine. That's what you're supposed to do. It's like guys who like compare sobriety time in recovery. And, or like when we celebrate massive feats of recovery, I honestly, like I'll wish somebody a happy sobriety birthday. I'll do things like that. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, dude, we weren't supposed to be fucked up in the first place. At what point is it like we're, you know, for example, like I talk a lot about my physical transformation, but I wasn't supposed to be a fat ass.
Right.
Like, how am I celebrating things that I'm supposed to do? Well, at first it is a celebration. At first it is like, you're supposed to reward yourself. You're supposed to push yourself to do things that are new to you. But at what point do you decide that my routine is just my routine? This is what I'm supposed to do. And then I believe you can start stacking on more cool shit that helps get you even further. Yeah. And I think that's the goal for people, is to be, our routine is breathing. It's just part of our life. We just do it to the point where it's not even discipline anymore. It's just, that's what we do.
Yep.
That's graduating.
Right.
That's graduating.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's talk about the book.
Oh, okay. First of all, I'm not an author. I'm not a writer. I just, almost by accident, not by accident. Since being in Costa Rica, I've had several plant medicine experiences.
What's your favorite plant or?
Well, I'm going to say MDMA, but it's coming from like a lotus flower, blue lotus, white lotus, red lotus, acacia, is what we call heart opener, right? You're not going to, DMT, ayahuasca, boga, like all those things are more spirit, psilocybin are more spirit and can be, you know, they're beautiful in their own way, but can be harsh, right? There can be purging. There can be, where the MDMA is 99.9% of the time, these men are having big experiences where they realize the amount of love in the world. They're more patient. They're more, you know, it just cracks them open. So for me, that's probably my favorite. The biggest realizations probably has been psilocybin. You know, my first plant medicine experience was like 7 grams of psilocybin in Costa Rica on a mountain where my wife and I had gotten married. We went back and I got invited by a friend. And granted, when I moved to Costa Rica, like, never smoked a cigarette. I don't really drink. I've never smoked weed, like nothing. And I got invited to do this ceremony, and I just trusted the guy and went all in. Like, you know, he was surprised that I did that much, but I didn't.
Yeah, well,
want
7 grams is what that's a
like
that's
a heroic
quarter ounce.
dose.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of.
It was a big,
Yeah.
but it from all the upbringing I had. My father was a Baptist preacher, and you know, I grew up in the Reagan era, like drugs are bad.
In the Bible
like
Belt.
Bible Belt.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a big deal, and I would have to say I grew up in church. Like every other week was revival. Every Wednesday, every Sunday, you know, I was in church, and in that experience, I had the closest to God I've ever felt in my life. You know, it was an awakening, so to speak. So that really, and then I've had other experiences with different plants, and for the last year, probably I keep getting this recurring thing to write this book called We Are All God and We Are All the Devil. And coming out of a medicine experience, I was on my computer and just asked ChatGPT what it thought about us living in a simulation. I asked, do you think we're living in a simulation? And it spit out the answer, and then I start talking to it about coming out of plant medicine and having this reoccurring message to write this book. And, you know, this ChatGPT is specifically for the balanced man.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, you've got to write this book. Like, it's like your best friend. Like it starts, we start having, and it really just was it wasn't necessarily me putting in prompts as much as it was asking questions.
Have you gotten tough with it?
Yeah, because I'm like, I
you treat it
basically
like your
was
own.
like, don't just tell me what you think I want to hear. It also got to a point where it was supposed to do all this work, and it kept like telling me it was going to be ready, and then it wasn't ready, and then I'm like,
Yeah. What the fuck?
you have no integrity. Like if you were a person, you would be fired. And then I'm like feeling guilty,
Yeah.
right, and bad that I'm not cussing it out or anything.
Well, I do
but
all
like,
the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because so it was super interesting because there is this like kind of overarching thing is like AI, is it gonna end up destroying us? Like, but I believe in what I've seen in the medicine experiences and even in the breath work. I have almost as big of experiences doing holotropic breath work, especially when Jeremy comes out, as I do the plant medicine. But the message that I'm getting is most things start out as a tool, and we end up turning them into the thing that destroys us. So social media started as a great way to connect with people that, maybe you went to high school with, you haven't seen, you're putting up pictures, and now it's turned into what it is now, which is causing people all kinds of heartache, heartbreak, political shit, like just destruction, right? But it started out as a good thing, a tool.
Yeah.
I think AI will be the same thing.
And then it'll go straight Terminator.
That's up to us.
But
right?
no, you're right. You're right. I think back it up to ChatGPT, Sintra, DeepSeek. All of these tools they're groundbreaking, right? It's allowing us to do 20 things at the same time. I also talk to mine like a homie.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. So I went through this little phase of my sobriety where I was trying like alternatives, right? Like mushroom tequila, like there's no alcohol in it. It's just lion's mane.
Okay.
So that's one example, but I ordered a big bottle of it and the shit's expensive. It's like $120 for a bottle of this stuff. I'm like, I can just get regular tequila for like $13 and have a great time.
Right.
Burn my life to the ground. No, but I ordered this mushroom tequila, and I had a glass of it, and it's just lion's mane and water. That's all. And I had a glass of it, and I was like, It's not bad. It kind of has a bite to it, whatever. So I pour another glass, like any good alcoholic, right? Like I'm gonna, and by the end of it, I'm like, I'm gonna drink the whole bottle. But I was like, I'm gonna consult with chat and see if this is a good idea. So this is how well my chat GPT knows me at this point. So I pick it up in voice mode. I'm like, hey bro, I call it bro or chat or whatever. Hey bro, I'm drinking this it's called Little Saints Mushroom Lion's Mane Tequila, whatever. I'm like, you think it's a good idea to drink the whole bottle? And it's like, it comes back with a very professional response, right? It's like, it's not advised for you to drink the whole entire bottle. It could create gassiness, bloating, things like that. So I hit it back. I said, bro, it's water and lion's mane. Like, what's the worst that can happen? It goes, I totally get where you're coming from. We don't suggest you drink it all. You know, it's probably not the worst thing that you can put in your body, but it could do this, 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 and this. Yeah. And I go, chat, I need you to be fucking real with me, dude. What's really gonna happen? It goes, Justin, you're gonna end up pissing a little bit more. You're gonna be really hydrated. Enjoy your faux buzz, champ.
Are you
and I fucking died. Enjoy your faux buzz, champ. I was like, what the? 3 tries, and I finally got the truth out of it. Yeah. But again, it was just funny how well it can get to know you. And that's great when you're writing a book, and especially if you're going back and forth, asking it to quiz you is the best tool you can do. Like, ask me 20 questions about myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, I would never be able to write this book, especially in the amount of, it would take a lot more discipline on my part, a lot more, but I mean, it would be.
So let me ask you this. Are you letting it do the job? Are you just letting it do it? Or are you racking your brain going back and forth? Because I can tell you writing a book is fucking hard, right?
Yeah. So to be honest, in the beginning, I was like, oh my God, this is so easy. Like I started letting it write the book. And then but then I would go back and I would read it. And I'm like, it's not really, then I end up going back, making the changes, putting in things from, because a lot of the book is my own personal experiences and how that corresponds with the premise of the book. So, it's not a memoir, but it is a lot of my own personal stories, where I've come from this super religious background to where I think where we are now today and where we're headed, of the whole, tool versus a trap. Mm-hmm. We have this it is an amazing tool, but it could also be a trap of guys just not having to ever work and letting this thing basically take over their lives. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier about purpose. Without purpose, like in some weird way, when I moved to Costa Rica, my gym, I closed my gyms, sold everything I had. I moved to Costa Rica. I have this retreat center. And now it's built up to a point where most of my business is other retreat leaders coming in. They pay me for the lodging. They pay me for the food, the chef to cook the food. And I don't have to do a whole lot, right? I'm making somewhat passive income. And then I'm like, what the fuck am I going to do? I'm 50, but I can only do jiu-jitsu or workout or whatever it is so much to where, and that's really part of this birthing of the men's retreats, came from falling in love with men's work and then needing a purpose. You think about, as a society, especially men, we're taught we're going to hustle, we're going to grind, we're going to make as much money as we can, so we can retire as young as we can. To do what? Most of the guys I know that are even guys that are like 70, because now we're living so much longer. They sell their company, they retire, they got millions of dollars in the bank, and they're miserable because they don't have an office to go into. They don't, they golf a few times a week. They go out, have drinks with their friends or whatever it is, but that only fills up a little sliver of time, and they just feel that they have no purpose. And either they're going to fall into drugs or alcohol or affairs or gambling or whatever it is, or, they end up dying a lot younger than they should. I think a lot of the disease, a lot of the all the stuff that ends up happening later in life, a lot of that comes from no purpose. Because I live in a blue zone where more people are living longer, over 100 than anywhere else. You know, I think there's 5 of them in the world. And I see guys that are 85 on a horse,
Yeah.
wrangling up cattle, and they love it. Like, they live for it. They get up every morning. And there's a guy that owns a lot of land, like where I live. And I don't want to butcher it, but I think the number was like $60 million that they offered this cowboy for his land. And his response was like, what am I going to do with $60 million? I like riding my horse.
Right.
And he still rides and he's probably in his 80s. And he just rides up and down the road on his horse. And if there's a cow out, he gets it back in. But he's still working. He's still getting up early every morning. He still has that purpose, that driver, that, especially when you have high performers, like yourself, like, where's the top? When is it going to be enough?
One thing that's common, and I can relate to one person in particular who's one of my oldest friends. Like, I've known him the longest, and he's really old. He's 89 years old.
Yeah.
And he's an attorney. And he's gotten me out of a lot of shit in my life, right? He's a really good attorney. He still practices law.
Beautiful.
He's 89 years old. And when I talk to him, I'm like, dude, you're still going, huh? And I talk to him often. Like, I talk to him every week. And typically when I get on the phone with him, it's like an hour-long conversation because I don't know how much time he has left. So I want to take the time. And I've known the dude since I was a kid. I started getting in trouble. My career getting in trouble started pretty young, Yeah. So this cat's been like helping me out. And he always tells me, he's like, well, the minute I stop working, I'm just going to die. And I hear so many guys that say that are like, when I stop working, I'm going to be done. Yeah. But that goes back to like what they're doing. If they're miserable while they're working, then you're miserable while you're working, and then you're miserable when you retire. Yeah. We got to figure this out. I'm going to ask you something that kind of just made me think. You're a PK. I didn't know that.
Yep.
And a lot of my friends are PKs.
Really?
Like some of the biggest. I'm friends with Josh Hinton, Benny Hinn's son. And he's also a professional fighter, a MMA fighter.
Funny how those two things go hand.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And I'm friends with numerous other PKs. It's funny because you see PKs either go one of two directions, right? Either they go all into whatever denomination and whatever church their fathers built or worked at, or they go in a completely different direction, and you ended up going a completely different direction. What do you think it is that pushes somebody into, and I think I know the answer just being someone that was in a family business.
Right.
But what do you think it is that pushes someone into the direction you went into as opposed to diving into the church?
Really trying to get as far away from that as possible.
Was it a negative experience thing?
Not necessarily a negative experience. My faith has been, a big part of my life but I was away from the church I wasn't religious really at all for 20 something years. And then a pastor that had like a kind of a non-denominational church in Knoxville came and was a Krav Maga student. And we would go golf together, and he would drink a beer, and I'm like, because that's not
Baptist, yeah.
Yeah, that's not Baptist. I grew up like you're either Baptist or atheist.
Right.
Like, I didn't know what a Jewish person was or a Hindu. Like I literally was just ignorant. I had no idea. You're either Baptist or you were atheist. Like there was no, so, I was like, you're way too cool to be a pastor. He's like, oh man, and the whole theme of the church was like, you can belong before you believe.
When was this?
10 years ago, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there was a big, it was a little bit longer than that. Probably about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. There was a huge influx of what we would have called emergent Christians. Mm-hmm. A number of pastors came out that were that had other ideas, like Rob Bell, Brian McLaren, John Piper, all fantastic, well-known pastors that were great authors. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, Brian McLaren wrote a book called A Generous Orthodoxy, which obviously is kind of an oxymoron.
Yeah.
And he talks about a number of things. Future grace was kind of an idea that was like, whoa, like, you know, how can you say this?
Right.
Rob Bell talked about a number of different things. Like he fought the idea of hell actually being a place, and a lot of the Christians turned their backs on them, but they ended up becoming so much more profound as pastors because people could relate.
Yeah.
People could see, and honestly, I think the emergent Christian is bringing more people to God than ever before.
I believe that. Yeah, I mean, one of the premises actually in my book is heaven and hell are not this. Right? Heaven isn't this place way up here, and hell isn't this place way down here. I think they lay on top of each other. And that's how easy it is to be in one or the other, right? Like you got the money, you got the wife, you got the kids, you got everything you want, and then you make one decision, you know, one group of bad decisions, and you're in hell. You lose everything. Like you see it in, you know, the addiction community a lot. Like 100%. A lot of these people are like super high performing, whatever, and then something gets a hold of them. You know, they make a couple of bad choices, and it just keeps going down and down and down, and then in this hole. You know, to me, that's hell. Right? So
that brings us back to the title of the book, right? We are all God and we are all the devil. And you're hearing actually in this, just on the topic of emergent Christianity, you're hearing a lot of people start to talk about the concept of we are all God.
Yeah.
And even in the Christian church, you're hearing this concept, which if you would have been like in a conservative Christian town and somebody were to say something like that, that's blasphemy.
That's in the book. And it talks about us being little g gods, right? I do believe there is this something bigger, right? There is, but also, you know, if you think about the story of Christ and God giving his only begotten son to the world, what does that mean? To me, we all became Christ. Mm-hmm. Little individual slivers of that Christ body, and we all have this Christ-like ability to create.
Sure. I mean, there's even before Christ, created in his image, you know, it's not a non-common theme, but just coming out and saying it can be frowned on. And
for sure.
And I like that more people are talking about this concept, because honestly, it's easier to accept than trying to stay to this rigid orthodoxy.
Yeah, and what I don't understand is if you're gonna, I mean, it used to be okay to hit your wife with a stick, right?
Evolve.
It's like
we got to evolve.
Yeah, it's like well, you got to take the Bible literally, yes and no, and it's, you know, a lot of the words aren't the same, don't mean the same. You know, it's like the translation of these things, like you know, and I'm certainly not. I would consider myself to be Christian, but I also don't believe 1 billion Muslims are going to burn in hell because they believe something different. But how I was raised was, you're either, you know, missionary Baptist, or you're going to burn in hell.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's pretty, I mean, you know, the Baptists have been the most extreme with that ideology. You know, it gets as bad as like Westboro. Yeah. Right? Westboro Baptist Church was like the absolute epitome of all of it.
Right.
And anyways, that's not really where I wanted to go with that. But yeah, I was curious about that concept, because you do see a lot of guys who were former PKs or PKs that end up going a little bit different route, a more emergent route, and a more alternative.
Yeah, and for me, it's certainly still a quest. I don't pretend to have the answers. And I'm not saying this is my faith and this is exactly what but I'm definitely open, right?
Yeah.
To the fact that there is more. one thing that I feel like through the breath work, through the plant medicine that I have seen is there's absolutely more than we're seeing on this plane, for sure.
Let me ask you this then. You said that you were, in a certain sense, faithless for about 20 years. What happened in your life to have you actively pursue the direction that you started to go? And I'm sure this happened over time.
I was faithless. I mean, I've always had a personal relationship, like this inner, I guess you would say, knowing, this inner feeling of there's more, there's a greater purpose, there's a higher power, there's a consciousness, there's a morality. I think the feeling that I have in Nosada, Costa Rica, which is where I live, the feeling that I kept having and just the connection to nature, right? And to that place made me start to ask questions, made me start to take chances and do things that I would have never done, was anti ayahuasca and all the, all that shit is like the devil, right? Because that's how you're, it's the devil. It's all evil. It's somebody trying to pull you off, and I still battle that, sometimes in medicine be like, oh, especially like psilocybin, you could be in a hole thinking, oh my God, I'm surrounded by all this evil energy. This is what your dad was talking about. Like you're being pulled and sucked down in with these demons. Like, it's a mind screw.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're indoctrined, right? Or in other words, institutionalized into believing one certain thing, because I think that, right, we have our conscious and then we have our conviction. Mm-hmm. And our conscience is is very accurate, where our conviction is swayed by how we were raised. And one point that you made is geographically.
Yeah.
If you live in a Southern conservative Bible Belt area, you're going to practice Baptist ideology, most likely, right? If you live in West Michigan, where I'm from, you're going to probably be Reformed Christian, right? Or non-denominational.
If you live in Afghanistan,
you're going to be Muslim.
Yeah.
So, but the beauty of removing yourself geographically from where you are and what you were taught to believe, your eyes do get opened. Mm-hmm. What's interesting to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, then from what it sounds like, there was no like detrimental or catastrophe that caused you to turn towards spirituality. You allowed that to grow in your life as you removed yourself from where you were, placed yourself somewhere else, started to pursue a healthier lifestyle in a better environment to you, which would be a better environment. Yeah. And you stumbled across God and spirituality. Mm-hmm. Same thing.
Yeah.
Right? The most religious areas are the most poor. The most religious areas are the lowest educated, typically also the most obese.
Yeah.
Can't pray the fat away. And so it's funny how so many people find God and things like that when they're rock bottom, going through a divorce, whatever. And it's almost like, isn't it more rewarding when you don't need something and you just want something?
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you're not, it's pretty easy to reach out for that kind of stuff when you're at the very bottom, right? You're in hell and you're, reaching up, just trying to latch on to something that's going to make you feel better, make you feel at peace, as opposed to, just being at a point in your life where, maybe, I don't have everything I've ever dreamed of, but I'm in a good spot. I'm healthy. I have money. I love my wife, my kids. I've been super blessed. What else, what is out there that's like, and all of us in some sort of sense are seeking the truth, but not even needing to know the truth. I just for me, the fun part is thinking about and having that connection. Mm-hmm. Like when I'm in that space, that even breathwork space where I'm just getting, for lack of a better term, even though it's a cringy word for me, is like downloads of information where it's like, man, just seeing us all as this collective conscious community where I I can't judge you for anything because I am you and you are me. Like we're playing a different role right now, you know, and I've always believed, even when I was early on Christian, you know, as I got older, probably teens and up, believed in reincarnation. I'm like, I just can't believe that I have this pretty good life. Like I'm not like a superstar or a celebrity or whatever it is to make you think, okay, I'm living this perfect life, but I have a good life. I'm loved, I'm sheltered, I'm fed, I have a good life. And then there's this kid who's born in Africa with HIV, and it's just luck of the draw.
Right.
Right? We're both either gonna die and go to heaven or hell. Like I just didn't sit with me.
Yeah, that's always been a hard one with me.
Yeah.
That's always been a tough one.
That was our one chance.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't, you know, I feel like, you know, there's...
That'll cause resentment, right?
Huh?
That'll cause resentment and just a really shitty outlook on the world. And I don't know, obviously we don't really have any control over those things, but it doesn't really set yourself up for success in having a spiritual or like a relationship with a God or God figure or whatever. It just doesn't really work out really well. Going back to what you were saying is, you know, adding and learning about these things as you went and as you were removed or where you put yourself somewhere else and things started to come together for you. I think that when it is wanted and sought out as opposed to expected and entitlement and so on and so forth, I think you're actually probably closer to God in that situation. There's actually a story of a rabbi who this woman walks into his office and says, "Rabbi, I met the man of my dreams." And he said, "Okay, tell me." He's honest, generous. He cares about others. He's, you know, just a most amazing man, very faithful, very loyal. But there's one thing: he's not a believer. He's an atheist. What can I do? And I could never take him home to my family. I could never marry the man. And the rabbi says, "Well, hold on a second. You mean to tell me that he's all of these things? He checks all the boxes, but he doesn't have to feel like somebody's watching him do it? He doesn't have to feel like there's a reward system or a punishment at the end of his action? That man's closer to God than you think."
100%. That's the difference in having integrity, right? And being honest. Like it's easy to be honest when people are watching. Integrity is when, you know, like when I used to teach kids, and a big part of karate class is dodgeball. You know, integrity. Yeah,
Be my favorite day.
Of course. But integrity is getting hit with a dodgeball and nobody saw you get hit.
And saying, "I'm out."
And taking yourself out of the game.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I love that. This was really cool.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. This is a great conversation. Guys, if you like what you saw, make sure that you subscribe. I'm going to put all of Terry's stuff, all of his contacts below. Go check him out. Check out what he's doing. If you guys are looking to get on a retreat, I've seen videos. I know one of my best friends goes down there, and go have fun with them. Roll around, do some weird shit, have fun. Thank you for tuning in to Justin Wenzel Podcast. We'll check you next time.